last live stream. And so we are back in the studio. Hopefully this is working. Hopefully we are fine. But obviously we have some questions to dive into. I know we have some questions on the site. We actually should be able to get some questions on YouTube going as well. Let me pull this up on my phone. Yes. Okay, perfect. This live stream's actually going. Thank you for anybody who is coming in here. But let me go ahead and get this going with the site questions real quick. Yak Season says 4 foot of snow in Buffalo. Are we going to flex London or McCaffrey? So again, looking at what we have with San Francisco, from what I've seen, it sounds like we should be expecting that Brock Purdy is going to play. But again, I mean, I can go through it. I can pull up the updated over-under. And you actually do have sportsbooks pretty damn low on this Niners offense this week, which I think partially it's weather, partially it's matchup. But regardless of however you want to view it, it is not good news for anybody in San Francisco. And yeah, really the only guy that I have been wanting to go through and play is going to be CMC and George Kittle, really the receivers I'm not interested in at all. We can go ahead and we can pull this up real quick. Let me look up the lines week 13 because I don't know what the hell this thing's showing me. Or you know what? Let's just go straight to the implied team totals. Let's really just get the actual projections. And then there we can go ahead and we can check out the over-under of the updated game because I was surprised to see that you actually did still have the Bills as 13-point favorites, even when you got the news that Brock Purdy was going to be playing here. And I want to see if this has changed at all. And obviously, as we get closer to the game, we have a better idea what the actual weather is going to be. But yeah, you have an implied team total about 19.5 points for the Niners. So the only offenses that projected out worse this week were the Raiders, the Giants, the Browns, and the Bears. So it should be a pretty damn bad offense in San Francisco. For me, if it was my own team, I'm still going to go ahead. I'm still going to play McCaffrey. Now, of course, no fault to you whatsoever. If you wanted to go through and if you wanted to say, well, I'm just going to go with the better offense in the better game environment where you're not having to concern yourself with the weather here. If you really wanted to go ahead and take London, I'm not going to fault you. But for me, I would go with McCaffrey. Now, let me move this over to Tom's question. Tom says, playing against Bowers and HN this week, so we need some monsters. Love the Flock League, by the way. Thank you, my guy. Let me see what I need to happen in the Flock League this week. I will say, I'm sure y'all have already heard me say this, but I'm in New York right now for the first time ever. So I am a little bit more out of the loop than usual in terms of usually we're in our studio. Usually I'm eyes glued. Actually, I didn't expect Waddle to have that good of a performance yesterday. But yeah, anyway, looking at this, for me, I'm not planning on playing Devonta Smith with my own team. And in the Flock League, I currently have a 46% chance to beat Nathan. But obviously, we need some big games myself. But yeah, absolutely brutal to go up against Bowers. Looking at Josh Allen versus Jaden Daniels, I mean, just going back over to the game environment, I know people are worried about the weather in Buffalo, but I mean, if you are looking at sports books, which obviously they have information on the weather, they currently do have the Bills and the Commanders projected out score the same amount of points, similar spreads, similar over-unders with both games. The games actually have the exact same over-under between the two of them. For me, I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to keep it simple with Josh Allen. Going down to the flex, Rachaad White has a great matchup. I will go with White. Probably, no, I'm going to go with Ridley. Rachaad White does have a phenomenal matchup, but again, it does look like Bucky is taking over, where Bucky had significantly more usage as a receiver this past week, which is going to be the main thing that I am looking at. And also, if you are just now coming in here, I do want to say again, I know we said this at the very beginning, but we don't have too many questions on the site right now, so I should be able to get to questions in the live chat as well during this live stream. Just let me make sure that I get through all the guaranteed questions on the site, then we can go to the questions in the live chat. But OG Watts coming through asking Baker or Stroud. We're going to go Baker in a good matchup. I mean, going through and looking at what you have with the projections here for this Tampa offense, the only offenses that projected to score more points this week were the Lions, the Chiefs, and then Baltimore, and then you had Tampa as the 4th highest projection according to sportsbooks. We've seen a little tiny bit of rushing upside for Baker. And then going down in the flex, I'm going to take Mike Evans. While Bucky does look like he is turning into the guy in Tampa, it still is a committee where you had 4 rushing touchdowns last week and only 1 went in the direction of Bucky Irving. Now, Nick coming through with our next question says, I'm back again. Hope you had a good Thanksgiving, Mason. 6-point passing touchdown. Thanks. And thank you. My guy had a phenomenal Thanksgiving. 6-point passing touchdown format, definitely going to be a lot closer between Herbert and Kyler as opposed to a 4-point passing touchdown league. Going through and looking at how the offenses project out, you currently are sitting here with an implied team total of about 20.5 points for the Arizona Cardinals. Whereas if you go over and look at the Los Angeles Chargers, you're up at about 24.5. Typically, I'd say, well, you know what? The Chargers are going to be a little bit more run first in comparison to what you have with Arizona. Kyler does have more rushing upside as well than Justin Herbert. Rushing touchdowns were 6 points. Passing touchdowns only worth 4. But if it's a 6-point passing touchdown format, there I think you actually can go with Justin Herbert instead. Going over to receiver, I'm going to be taking Garrett Wilson. And then we're going to go with wide receiver in the flex spot as well. We're going to go with Harrison and Brian Thomas, operating under the assumption that Lawrence is good to go. And we actually had a report coming out this morning saying that the Cardinals were planning on heavily involving Marvin Harrison and running the offense through him. Now, of course, much easier said than done. We'll see what the actual game is like. But No Sleep Ed says, I faced Bowers and Jonnu this week. Am I cooked? For your matchup to go through and to decide to flex Jonnu, impressive to say the least. Take Stones. Clearly, it worked out for them. But regardless, let's go through and let's try to figure out how we can get the highest ceiling possible. Kamara, Brees are pretty much automatic starts here. I think we can just say Kenneth Walker is going to be start as well. Jamar Chase and London at wide receiver. Tight end Hawkinson. Flex, we're going to go with Brees. You have a phenomenal team, a phenomenal lineup. I don't think you're cooked because how strong your roster is, but obviously absolutely brutal for that team to end up having to go up against both the combo of Jonnu and Bowers to start on Thursday. But D-Money says lineup's pretty locked besides the flex, so we're going to go Jennings or Tony Pollard. For me, I'm going to go with Pollard. Spears is playing, so that's not great. But with Jennings, given the overall projections that you have in San Francisco, where this does project out to be a bottom 5 offense in the NFL this week, whether you want to blame it on the matchup, whether you want to blame it on the weather, regardless of what you want to blame it on. While I do think Jennings is the wide receiver 1 in San Fran, still not really going to be excited about getting him in at all. Now, Bodie coming through with the start sit question. Here, we need a flex between, we didn't play Hopkins, so it's really between Harrison and Taysom. For me, I am going to play Harrison here. I mean, again, if you were looking at the report that we had this morning, I don't want to read too much into this, but they were saying that they are planning on funneling things through Harrison. And with Minnesota, they are dogs in this matchup, so you can see the Cardinals having to go through and throw the ball in the second half if they fall behind. Now, Jack Imbarak, longtime member of the flock, always happy to see you. So not really able to consider Jordan Mason, of course, not playing Rome, already played. It's Amari, Tank Dell, or K. Otten here. I'm not going to consider the tight end in comparison to these other receivers. Now, let me go through and see if I can get some updates on Keon Coleman. I know Kincaid is going to miss. No Kincaid. Does make it a little more interesting to play the receivers in Buffalo. Again, the weather may be a concern here. It is always very difficult to go through and try to make decisions far out in advance of what the weather looks like, though. But anyway, let me go through and let me just double check about Keon here to make sure that I'm not going to say something that's wrong. Okay, Keon is still listed as questionable on Sleeper. Let me see if I can go through and find anything on Twitter here. Can y'all please also let me know in the chat, is Keon Coleman playing today? Obviously, we're not going to get actives and inactives for Buffalo for a long time. It's the Sunday night game. Okay. I can't find any information for if Keon's playing or not. I see that the Bills didn't activate any receivers. So I think we assume that Amari's the play here. I think you probably go with Amari, at least with no Kincaid. Obviously, weather's a concern, but you do have the Bills. I mean, sportsbooks know about the weather, projected for about 25.5 points. Should be a higher scoring offense than average. Should be a higher scoring offense than Houston, even with Houston having a great matchup and much better weather, of course. And now, Be Cosmic coming through with our next question. Quarterback, we are going to go with, I'm going to go with A-Rich over Brock Purdy. I mean, if you're looking at the Colts, they're favored in this game. The Colts project to score more points than what you actually have with the Niners this week. A-Rich, you're going to monopolize some of those points with their rushing, where Purdy, not so much. For me, again, I know that y'all are annoyed with us showing this, and I know y'all hate us talking about sportsbook projections, but again, sportsbooks know more than you do. They know more than I do. It's worth it to look at them. And they do have the Niners as a bottom 5 offense in the league this week. The Niners falling apart. Bad weather, bad matchup. I don't want to play Purdy. I Purdy on my own team. I'm playing Matthew Stafford instead. I think you go A-Rich. Running back, obviously, Derrick Henry, you lock in. And then I will go Chase Brown over Bucky Irving in the flex relatively easily as well. I mean, obviously, Bucky Irving, great game this past week. Not only a great game this past week, but also a phenomenal matchup this week. But ultimately, Bucky looks to be in a committee, whereas it looks like Chase Brown is a running back that is just seeing 80+% of his offense. Now, B. Zybert coming through says, should we flex James Cook or Jerry Jeudy? So you have no Cedric Tillman, so I definitely move Jerry Jeudy up in my rankings. But with that being said, I'm definitely going to take James Cook here. James Cook, you are looking at a running back that has every single touch in the red zone, has receiving usage in one of the best offenses in the league as well. Now, Big Route says, please help me set the strongest lineup. Stafford versus Kyler, the Rams offense should be much higher scoring. If it's a 4-point passing touchdown format, however, I would go with Kyler Murray, just knowing that you're going to get a little more rushing upside. For me, I am for sure going to play Jonathan Taylor over Bucky Irving. Obviously, Bucky's significantly better this past week, and Bucky does have a better matchup as well. But Bucky Irving's going to play about 50-ish% of the snaps in Tampa, whereas Jonathan Taylor is going to play approximately 100% of the snaps in Indianapolis. And the Colts are actually favored in this game. They should be able to run the ball in the second half. And then we're going to go Terry, London at wide receiver. And then you can go through and you can play Bucky Irving in the flex, of course. But for me, I would still take Jonathan Taylor over Bucky this week, even if Bucky has been crushing Taylor. Callie Kidd says, Lamb let me down, needing the big win this week. Okay, so running back, I think you just lock and load Chase Brown, Breece Hall as auto starts. Again, while it's a tough matchup for Brown on paper, at the end of the day, this is a spot where the Bengals project out to be an above average offense. They are favored, and Chase Brown's going to have the receiving role, and he is going to be seeing pretty much every single snap in the backfield. We go with Puka there at wide receiver, tight ends. David Njoku versus Evan Ingram. You have Lawrence playing, so I'm actually going to be going with Ingram. And then down in the flex, this is a very interesting thing to look at. Based off the tough matchup that you have for James Conner, I think we are going to go ahead. We're just going to lock and load Drake London, especially in a full PPR format. Now, let's move this over. Cali Kid coming through with another start set. Says, what's up, Mason? Are we starting Connor? He just got paid. And are we sitting Allen due to the weather? For me, Josh Allen versus A-Rich, I'm still going to go Josh Allen. Again, sportsbooks, they know the weather. They have moved the over-under of this game from 47 points down to 44.5. But they are still projecting out the Buffalo Bills to be much higher scoring than what you should expect to have with the Indianapolis Colts. And you just have had so much of a higher floor from Josh Allen than Anthony Richardson so far this season. James Conner does have a really tough matchup, but there's no way I can play him over Chase Brown given the offenses and also given the receiving workloads. Wide receiver, London and Brian Thomas will be the pretty easy plays with Lawrence good to go. And then down in the flex, Bucky, James Conner, I have them ranked back-to-back in my rankings. For me, I do think it's kind of flip a coin. James Conner is going to have a better workload. Bucky Irving, better matchup, and more efficient running back so far this season. Can y'all please spam the chat? Would y'all rather play Bucky or James Conner? And again, I have to, we're traveling here. So sadly, we're not the usual setup. I have to look at the chat on the phone. But if you can let me know, Bucky Irving or James Conner, that'd be very useful. God, your boy's dehydrated. We got Danny in the chat. says he has Bucky at 13 this week. We got everybody in the chat saying Bucky. Again, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Connor has more just straight up touches. But with that being said, if you are looking at Bucky, he's been a more efficient back. The receiving workload is there. You had the 6 targets last week. It's a great matchup. It's an offense that projects out to be not only a heavy favorite, but in a very high scoring environment as well. You actually do have an implied team total about 26.5 points for Tampa, which is only behind the Lions, Chiefs, and Ravens. I still do want to remind everybody, he had 4 rushing touchdowns in Tampa last week. Bucky gets one of them. So I don't view Bucky as like the Jonathan Taylor 3-down level workhorse. But at least with Bucky, you are in a very comfortable position in that you do have a good matchup, you have a good offense, and you have a receiving role. But Air Max says, we're going to go Evan Ingram or Will Dissly. For me, I'm going to go Evan Ingram now that you actually do have Lawrence good to go. And also, obviously, there are just no receivers left in Jacksonville outside of Brian Thomas. So I think Ingram gets flooded with targets. And then London or Metcalf. Really appreciate you, my friend. I am going to go London over Metcalf. I would consider Metcalf over. He already played Jaden Reed. Oh, shoot. Dear God. Okay, we're back. Thank God. We're on the laptop here. I thought we had a complete disaster. But anyway, if we are looking at this, Jaden Reed's already played. So, and obviously Reed had himself a phenomenal day. So really it's only, are we switching DK in for Ladd McConkey or Drake London? And no, I'd probably go with Ladd and London in that instance. Okay, let me get through these next 2 start sit questions, and we have a team review, and I'm going to answer some of the questions in the live chat, and then we'll go back to the questions on the site. But Ricky Stenicky? I'm an idiot. I can't read. I'm sorry. Happy BR must drop one guy. We need to win. Thanks and thank you. So who are we going to drop? It's either the wide receiver 2 in Cleveland or the wide receiver 2 in Denver. In terms of who we're starting this week, assuming Mooney's good to go, I'll put Mooney at wide receiver. Down in the flex, I close my eyes and play Deebo Samuel. That's the last thing that we want to do here. And I guess actually who you can drop at this point is maybe Braylon Allen. Given the fact that it looks like Breece is good to go. And even if you were to have that injury to Breece and Braylon Allen were to step in, the Jets offense obviously isn't nearly as exciting now as what it was before. But let's move this over to Jace. We need a wide receiver and a flex. I think I go with Amari here over Deebo. Again, obviously, you have a bad weather game for both players. Amari, you have no Kincaid, and you possibly have no Keon Coleman as well. So I just think that the receivers there in Buffalo should have a decent little target share. Wide receivers, flex. I'm not that interested in Gus Edwards. You'll have literally nothing as a receiver. I'd be more so inclined to go with the receiver. I think you could go with Michael Pittman, knowing that you have no Josh Downs, so you're going to have the safe target volume. But again, obviously, if the weather was better, I'd be a little more inclined to go through and just play Deebo Samuel. But Pittman does look to be in a fine spot if you are trying to play things safe. I just don't know if you already had, say, John Achane go off and Jaden Reed go off. You don't really need to roll the dice here. You can't afford to really just play it safe. So in that instance, I think I'd probably just go ahead. I'd probably diversify and not go all in on the game that could have devastatingly bad weather in Buffalo. So I probably in that instance just go through and play Pittman in the flex. But I'm going to pull up the phone real quick. I'm sorry I can't read the chat on the screen today. Again, we are traveling. We are in New York. I got a cool little Yankees hat. Maybe we should have thrown that on. But, of course, got to rep Texas. Hook 'em horns. It's a good day to be a Longhorn. It's a very, very sad day to be an Aggie. Like, the sad thing is, and now that we play A&M again, I'm willing to talk trash on A&M. When I went to UT, nobody at UT gave a damn about A&M. The only thing that we cared about was OU because we never played A&M. But now that we play against each other again, I guess the rivalry is back on, and I'm allowed to talk crap of College Station. And I will say, anybody watching this that lives in College Station, I'm sorry for you. Because not only do you lose a football game, not only do you get embarrassed against the team that makes up your entire identity. Yes, your entire team. This identity is around the Texas Longhorns. I would try to come up with one on your own. But at the end of the day, you don't get to go back to a city like Austin. You get to go back to College Station. So RIP Aggies. I feel bad for y'all. But Danny says his voice is cooked, man. I mean, I was obviously, I've said this 1,000 times, but I'm in New York traveling right now. So I didn't get to watch like the majority of the games yesterday. I didn't even get to watch the Chiefs and Raiders game on Friday. But yeah, I got back to the apartment last night, and then I threw on the UT game, and then I saw on like the little tiny ticker that goes to the bottom that Michigan won, and I was like, oh my God, and I went straight to Twitter to look up what happened. But Caesar says we got to turn on a light. I'm sorry. We can take the hat off. Maybe we can get a little bit of light going on that way, but we got hat hair. So I'm gonna rep UT. But anyway, let's stop clowning on A&M. Let's start reading some of the questions in the chat. Austin asking if we have any more injury updates. I can go through and I can see if we have anything. I guess, yeah, actives, inactives should have just came out right now. So hopefully we have some additional info. I'll pull that up for you, my guy. Going through and looking at this, Demario Douglas is active for week 13. Don't care. Breece Hall active for week 13. That was expected. Alec Pierce active. Don't care. Trevor Lawrence is active. Lawrence is good to go. I think you really need to start Brian Thomas. I think you need to start Evan Ingram. And you know what I need to do probably at this point is let me pull up the site, and I need to update our rankings. Like I said, again, I very much am sorry. I've not updated the rankings in a couple days here because we've been very busy. It was the girlfriend's birthday yesterday. We were in New York for the first time ever for the holidays. So let me update the week 13 rankings with all the injury updates that we are looking at. So first thing is, of course, I need to go ahead and I need to move up Brian Thomas. We need to move up Jerry Jeudy. We need to move down the Niners receivers. I'd rather start Brian Thomas over Ridley. I'd start him over Smith. I'd start him over Mooney. Hell, I'd start him over Flowers, start him over Hopkins. I think Brian Thomas is for sure a top 24 wide receiver this week. Easily have to move him up. I'd rather play Jeudy over Debo. And then obviously we had DJ Moore ranked here. I'm not going to move DJ Moore's ranking after he blows up. I mean, he already played, so that's on me for ranking him too low. But I think we're going to move Jerry Jeudy ahead of Ridley. I'd move him ahead of Smith. I'd move him ahead of Mooney. I'd move Jeudy up to about wide receiver 27. Are there any other real updates that we need to give? Maybe we jump Amari over Jameson, Shakir. I'm going to move Debo down below Amari. I'd rather play Amari with no Kincaid and potentially no Keon. Going over to the other receivers that we are looking at. Are there any real updates? I'd probably rather play Pittman over Dell. We have no Tillman now. We have no Josh Downs. Sorry. Again, I'll get to your exact questions. I almost think updating the rankings on the site just is better for everybody in general. And I apologize again that I've not been able to update these in a couple days. Like I said, this has been the busiest week of my season. Not from a work perspective, but for taking time off and hanging out with the girlfriend and doing stuff. Is there anything else at wide receiver that desperately needs to be updated? Not exactly. Let's go over to running back. I need to move Brian Robinson up, and we need to drop Eckler off to the bottom here. Let's see. But yeah, Brian Robinson, obviously a lot more appealing now that you have no Austin Eckler today as well. I think I would rather have Bucky over Connor. Looking at Brian Robinson, where did we put this man at? I'd rather have him over Pollard. Hubbard is close. Hubbard had pretty much every single freaking snap last week. Going through and looking at the rest of this. Are there any adjustments we need to make? Again, I'm not moving any players that have already played. It's a little cheap for us to do that. To do tight ends. Clearly, we should have had Bowers at tight end 1. That's my fault. We need to move Kincaid to the bottom. Kincaid's been ruled out. Okay. And then quarterback. Looks like Purdy is going to play. So let's move Purdy up. I'd probably play Purdy right behind. Probably play Purdy instead of Geno. But given the weather and given the environment, I really don't want to play Purdy. Well, let me submit those minor updates. But let's go back over and let's pull up more of the injury updates that we have right now, and then we can update more rankings, answer more questions in the chat. Okay. So Lawrence active for week 13. Brock Purdy will play, isn't 100% healthy. Yeah, again, really don't want to play any of the Niners receivers. Don't want to play Purdy. Tajay Spears is going to be playing. Rodgers considered a long shot to be with the Jets next season. The coach in Arizona is coming through and saying that they are really going to revolve the offense around Harrison today. Hollywood could return in week 15. I'm sorry, in 16 or 17. Week 15 is going to be his final clearance. Devonta Smith is still considered a game time decision. Cedric Tillman is out. Lawrence is playing again, and you have no Austin Eckler. James Conner gets a 2-year extension. And I don't think there's anything else for us to look at, but let me go through and let me pull up the questions that I have in the chat. Again, I'm sorry if these on my phone, and I'll try to answer as many as possible, and then we'll get back to the questions that we have on the site. Okay. So if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. Tom says Amari or Najee in the flex. Full PPR format, I'd probably rather have Amari Cooper, given the injuries that you have in Buffalo. But again, that is going to be something we need to monitor the weather with. Alex says Mike Evans or Bucky Irving. For me, I'm pretty easily going to be going through and playing Mike Evans. Again, with Bucky, it's a great matchup. I understand why a lot of people are excited, but I do want to be realistic in that you are looking at a running back that is in a really large committee where you did have 4 rushing touchdowns last week in Tampa, and Bucky obviously gets one of them. Unlimited says, are you starting Purdy or Stafford this week? I'm in the same boat. Yeah, I'll go through and I'll show you my team, my situation, what I'm doing. Because, yeah, I'm sure you already know this, but those are my 2 quarterbacks right now. I had been relying and I've been going back and forth between Cousins and Purdy so far this season. But with the week 12 bye, with Purdy missing, I had to pick up Matthew Stafford to play last week. And right now I have Stafford and Brock Purdy both with my own team. And what I am planning on doing is I am planning on going with Stafford over Purdy. Again, nasty weather. They're saying Purdy's not 100%. You go through and look at the sportsbook projections. You have the Rams with an implied team total about 25.5 to 26 points. You're looking at the Niners down at about 19 points. Obviously, Purdy gives you a little more rushing upside, but it's not like it's some insane level. So for me, my decisions with my own team, I'm going with Stafford over Purdy. The other calls that I'm making is I decided to bench Jalen Waddle and Devonta Smith. I could end up playing over Najee Harris. But the thing is, obviously, we don't have the clarity with Najee by the time we got to make that call. I'm sorry, we don't have the clarity with Smith. So if they were to tell me, hey, yeah, Smith is going to play, he's 100%, not really any limitations either, I think that I could go through and potentially play Devonta Smith over Najee Harris myself, but it's just very difficult with us not having that clarity. And I'll also show y'all, in case y'all are interested in anything else going on in the Flock League. Let's see. Sal and Avery both have an absolute barn burner right now, where Sal had Dowdle go off, Jonnu go off, and the Dallas Cowboys defense go off. But Avery kind of saved the day with Brock Bowers taking off for him. And then I guess Corey had a big game, or maybe not so much. He's just had a bunch of players play. DJ Moore had himself a fine day. But it looks like most of these matchups are very close. We are pretty much 50-50 at this point with Nathan. Thing that saved me is my matchup with Nathan. He had Carlson go 1 for 4 on field goals. And what's funny is I did not even get to watch that game on Friday. So when I got to see it, when I saw that, I was freaking pumped. But let me move this back over to the chat. Give more. Happy to see you, my guys. This 12-team non-PPR sit to Aaron Jones, Drake London, and Cooper Kupp. For me, I'm probably going to be benching Aaron Jones and Drake London. It's a lot tougher in a non-PPR format, of course, because in a non-PPR league, you are just kind of chasing touchdowns. So it's not as simple as just going with the guy that's going to have the target volume. So that is a really tough spot. But real quick, please, if you have not done so already, go down there, hit that like button. It does help us out a ton, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see. Hosey says, how do you feel about Wilson in the Jets offense? I'm going to go through and we can look at what sportsbooks are projecting out for the Jets offense. And I do want to remind y'all, a big reason why we look at these sportsbook projections, even if it annoys people, is they're going to be more accurate than whatever the hell I can tell you or whatever the hell anybody else on YouTube can tell you. But the Jets do have an implied team total about 21 points this week against the Seahawks. So they do project out to be about an average offense this week. The benefit, obviously, that you have with Wilson and this Jets offense in general is it's just extremely concentrated. There are only going to be 3 players that are touching the ball between Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, and Breece Hall. So if it is an average to an above average offense, all 3 players should be extremely viable in fantasy. So I would start Garrett Wilson for sure. But again, I mean, I know we've used this analogy 1,000 times, but I think it's the most accurate one, where the Jets offense is just a poor man's version of what you have with the Rams, where both offenses are extremely concentrated. The difference is, of course, with the Rams, they're just a much better offense than what you have with the Jets. Okay. Now let's move this over to our next question. Yeet Your Feet says, Mason Elp, Josh Allen, or Bo Nix. I'm for sure going to go with Josh Allen myself. Allen's giving you higher floor this season, and at the same time, sportsbooks are giving the Bills the benefit of the doubt over the Broncos this week. Dan Russo says, Evan Ingram over Taysom Hill. If it is a full PPR format, I will be going with Evan Ingram. That's one thing I forgot to do on the site real quick, is let me go ahead and move Evan Ingram up my tight end rankings. I would rather play Ingram over Disley. I'd rather play him over... I think I put Evan Ingram up at like tight end 6 this week. As realistically speaking, who do you look at besides Evan Ingram in this offense? It's going to be the only player. I mean, him and Brian Thomas are going to be the only guys that have really any viability. Let me see. Can I log into Underdog on Safari here? Dang it. Okay. I figured it was going to be hard. But let me see if there's anything else in the chat. Fred says Disley or Kyle Pitts. I have them ranked effectively back-to-back. It is up to you. RR Edit says, would you put Waddle over Jameson Williams rest of season? I can show you what my rest of season rankings are right now. In reality, I think that they are very comparable. I wouldn't fault you to go one way or another between Waddle and Jameson. For me, I have them essentially back-to-back here. Honestly, as we go through and update this with the injury to Josh Downs, probably got to move Downs lower. But yeah, going through and looking at both Waddle and Jameson, I mean, effectively, they're both just boom, bust, touchdown, long play wide receivers. You can make an argument that Jameson's in the much better offense between the two, so you should have Jameson ahead of Waddle. Honestly, I have more Jameson in Underdog best ball drafts this year, but I have Waddle in the Flock League. So my bias is I don't even know where they would line up there, but I think that they are extremely close, and I think it's up to you. I think both are just borderline flex plays, depending on the matchup that you're in. Okay. Matthew says Pittman or Jennings. I'm going to go with Pittman. I really, in San Francisco, how I view it right now, is I think you have to play CMC. I think you have to play Kittle. And then you have to bench the receivers. I wouldn't be surprised if a receiver had a big game tonight, but it's not something I can naturally expect. But let me go through, and I think we have some more questions on the site that we need to get through real quick. So I definitely want to get this team review going for Rab. Really appreciate you, my guy. Let me hook you up with both a free trade question and a free start sit question as well, just in case there's anything else you want to follow up with this. It says, first year player, and I was hoping not to make the playoffs and rebuild, but I made it. Should we try to make a push? Also, I found you guys after we traded Najee, Waddle, Cousins, and a 2026 first for Herbert and Lamb. What are your thoughts? So it's a one quarterback format, I believe. And honestly, I think it's a very fair price point to go out and get CeeDee Lamb. Our team name is the Akron Rejects. We are currently 6th in the league analyzer. So we are right in the middle of the road. What is interesting with this is it really just looks like a regular Dynasty league, something that you wouldn't typically see in a redraft format, where you do have the absolute juggernaut roster up at the top, and you have these teams at the bottom that absolutely have no shot to do anything whatsoever. So we are currently sitting here. It's saying that we're 5-5. Clearly, that is not true, unless we started this league. Maybe we started this league a couple weeks into the season. I don't know. But anyway, I believe this is a one quarterback Dynasty league. Rab, if you were in this live chat right now, it'd be great if you could go through and clarify these league settings with us. Looks like we have a 2025 first, which is really nice to see. It looks like we actually have a couple 2025 first. Quarterback, we are rolling with Herbert, Caleb, Tua. A really comfortable spot to be in, right? All these quarterbacks should have value in 2025, 2026. While at the same time, they are guys that we can definitely play based off matchups right now as well. So really comfortable spot to be at quarterback in Dynasty, where it's going to help us contend this season, while at the same time, it's going to give us that long-term value. I'm going over to running back. Running back, if you're a rebuilding roster, is typically something that we just want to be offloading any chance that we get. Understanding that at the running back position, you are looking at guys that more times than not will be worth less in the offseason than they are right now. And here, when we have Breece, he's one of the very few running backs where we can actually confidently say that he is going to be a cornerstone piece that we can build around in 2025 and beyond. Obviously, I would say Jonathan Brooks is also one of those outlier examples of a running back that actually could be more valuable this offseason than he is today. But clearly, if you wanted to go through and make a push, it would make a lot of sense for us to go through and upgrade the running back 2 position for this season by going through and trading away Jonathan Brooks for a piece that's going to help us win right now. Going over to wide receiver, we have Lamb as a cornerstone asset that's going to help us contend this second. And for the long term, more likely than not, the long term based off the injuries to both Lamb and Dak Prescott. Rome Odunze, definitely more of a long-term asset than a short-term. Xavier Worthy, more long-term than short-term. Sutton, you're going to get that short-term production with, however. And then obviously Wicks and Jennings as viable depth pieces. And then going over to tight end, we have 2 short-term tight ends with Mark Andrews and Taysom Hill. So definitely very much a team that I feel like it's in the middle, right? I mean, if you were in a position where you wanted to push in to win right this second, I would say it makes a lot of sense to go ahead and to actually look to offload Jonathan Brooks if you can sell him at a premium to go get a running back that can help us win right now and potentially a wide receiver as well from a rebuilding team. Whereas if you were a team that wanted to go, okay, no, actually we could pivot over and play for 2025 and beyond, I think you have the assets to sell on the other end where you can actually look to go throw Cortland Sutton on the trade block, Taysom Hill on the trade block, Mark Andrews on the trade block, and see what we could get in return for those pieces. So I know you mentioned that you wanted to go through and you wanted to actually push into contend this second. So going through and looking at some of the teams that are maybe rebuilding in your league, the teams here at the bottom, this team's currently 2-8. They have CMC. I mean, honestly, I think that if they're a 2-8 rebuilding roster that's just trying to earn themselves the highest pick in 2025, I wouldn't hesitate to see if we could send them Jonathan Brooks and a third for McCaffrey, or Jonathan Brooks and I don't know, Xavier Worthy to see if we can get back like McCaffrey and Tank Dell and see if that would help us contend more so right now and give them an asset that's going to be guaranteed to increase in value going into this offseason. Same thing over here, this Bo Dallas team, sending them Jonathan Brooks and getting back Alvin Kamara, sending them Jonathan Brooks and Xavier Worthy, getting back Alvin Kamara, David Montgomery, that really could help you push to win right now. And I understand that it seems absolutely crazy to say that anybody would accept that for something like Jonathan Brooks and Dynasty where they are a rebuilding roster. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you are one of these teams, Alvin Kamara turns 30 this offseason. So if you're a rebuilding roster and you could pivot off the 30-year-old running back to go get a running back that's in a pretty decent spot to gain in value this offseason, I think if I were them, I'd strongly consider it if I was sitting here with only 2 wins this season and really needed to pivot over to a rebuild. So I think those are the very clear plays to make if you're in a spot where you wanted to pivot to a contending approach. I wouldn't suggest offering up any of our 2025 first. Instead, I'd really prefer going through and selling some of these depth rookies that are almost guaranteed to increase in value going into next year. But at the same time, we can cash out and we can get some really strong production this season, even if the asset that we buy is going to be worth less this offseason than it is right this second. So that would be my personal approach with it. Obviously, I'd feel completely fine to toss them a 2025 third, to toss them a 2025 fourth, whatever it may be. But for me personally, I really don't want to be holding on to the first round picks if we can, which I think you can. And it would give us a lot of flexibility this offseason, where if you wanted to reevaluate this offseason and then decide to actually move over into a rebuilding approach, that is something that you could potentially do. But again, I did hook you up with that free start sit question and that free trade question. So if you have anything else, please send it my direction. I'd be super happy to take a look at it for you. I definitely think you're a team that can look to contend right now, but it would require us sending one of those long-term rookies to get some short-term production in here. I think that'd be the main thing that you'd need. Okay, G-Salt coming through with our next question. Always happy to see you. We need a flex between Charbonnet, Estime, Mostert, Devonta Smith, Keon, Dallas Goedert, Will Dissly. For me, I'm going to roll the dice that Devonta Smith plays. As of now, he's a game time decision. Should be a super high scoring game environment if he does play. Obviously, not something we have any guarantee with, but it is nice having Keon Coleman as potentially an option that you can roll the dice with if Smith misses, or even if Smith misses and you go, well, Mason, I don't know if Keon Coleman's going to play tonight, then you could just pivot over to Dallas Goedert with comfortability. So for me, I would roll the dice with Devonta Smith here in this instance, even if I'm not super high on Smith's chances of playing right now. Now, next question coming out from Cuban Missile. It's a free question. Here, we need a tight end and a flex. I'm going to go with K. Dotton, which should be a very high-scoring offense. And then I'll kind of double down on this. We will go with Bucky Irving. I think if you wanted to go with anybody instead of Bucky Irving in the flex spot, it would be Jackson Smith and Jigba. But obviously with JSN, you'd have a little bit of a tougher matchup here. Now, Trevor says, LOL Aggies. Again, it's a poor day to be a Texas Aggie. First off, what the hell even is an Aggie? Second off, dear God. Running back, we are just going to play Breece Hall, Chase Brown. Stupid simple. They are auto starts until you see the snaps go down for either one. Wide receiver, we are going to lock and load Mike Evans in a good matchup, what should be a very high scoring offense. And then here in the flex, full PPR format, I would go with T. Higgins over Bucky Irving. Obviously, Bucky does look to be really exciting in this matchup, especially with the receiving role increasing. But again, I do want to reiterate that you are looking at him in a committee still. Now, Trevor coming through says, wish I started Laporta. Trust me, my guy, I had to start Laporta. I wasn't feeling comfortable with it, and it feels good. As somebody who has started Laporta with a bunch of dud weeks so far this season, it is feeling good, good, good. Here, quarterback between Anthony Richardson and Kirk Cousins. For me, I'm going to go ahead. I will, dear God, probably go A-Rich in a 4-point passing touchdown format. The offenses project out very similarly. Higher over-under in the game in Atlanta. You know, you can go Cousins if you really wanted to. Going down to wide receiver, we are looking at London, Higgins, Downs, Puka, just an absolute must-start option. And then honestly, I would take both the receivers in the flex spot, especially in a full PPR format. I mean, looking at Bucky, I get it. But again, like you're looking at a committee running back versus the wide receivers like London, who are just giving you permanently 20 points almost every game, close to it. Now, Bopeel coming through says, need help with 2 wide receivers in a flex and a quarterback. Thanks. So thank you. Quarterback, I would go Kyler over Stafford in a 4-point passing touchdown format, giving Stafford in a 6-point passing touchdown league. Wide receiver, we're going to go Garrett Wilson with Rodgers being good to go. We're going to go Brian Thomas with Lawrence playing. And then down here in the flex, I would say that Brees is just a locked and loaded starter. But obviously, sitting pretty after the Jacobs and Achane performances. Now, Pico coming through says, need help, start 2 between Walker, Terry, or Bucky. I will go Higgins versus Terry is actually pretty damn close for me. I mean, if I'm looking at my rankings this week, I personally had Terry McLaurin at 11. I had Higgins at 6. I guess you do have a little bit of a tougher matchup with Higgins. You have a little bit of a better offense. Sorry, a better role with McLaurin with less target competition. And then down in the flex, I'm going to go with Higgins over Bucky. Like, let me go through, and can I pull this up? What are the projections with Bucky right now on Underdog? I see After 9 show says Bucky or Addison. For sure, you go Bucky Irving over like Jordan Addison. It's just for me, if you're looking at T. Higgins, every single game that you've had minus his first game this season where he's coming off an injury, Higgins is just absolutely crushed. Bucky Irving is higher, lower, 84.5 total yards, 12.95 points. Yeah, Higgins is higher, lower, 70.5 receiving yards. I think you have to. Higgins is just a must-play option. Now, Bonehead says, happy BR, Ridley, Jennings, Gus, Dell. Thanks, Mason. Thank you. I'm assuming we need, if you're just asking between one of these guys, for me, I would go with Calvin Ridley, where you get the guaranteed target volume. Obviously, it's a very bad offense, but I'm not super excited about the Niners offense at this point. And then if we're looking at Gus Edwards, just a running back that simply is not really going to have anything as a receiver here. So yeah, I think you go London, JSN at wide receiver, running back, Gibbs, Achane, and then for the flex, I will go Calvin Ridley. Now, Christopher coming through with our next question. Quarterback, I'm going to be going with Burrow over Baker despite the matchup. Wide receiver, you play London. Down in the flex, I think you're going to go with Bucky Irving and Cortland Sutton. Yeah, I would play Bucky over Metcalf. Give more. Happy to see you. Just saw you in the chat too. I will take London over Brian Robinson. Obviously, Brian Robinson is very appealing with no Austin Eckler here, especially in this matchup for the Commanders and Daniels, where they should be able to run the ball relatively easily. I mean, right now, they are currently about 6-point favorites over Tennessee, so you can assume that you have a decent amount of rush attempts for Brian Robinson. But again, full BBR format, I just personally view London as one of these must-start wide receivers, regardless of what the matchup is. Now, Works comes through, says, hope you're well, Mason. Appreciate all you do. Appreciate you, my friend. I would love to play both these running backs. I really hope that we can play Chase Brown here in the flex. But you obviously got to go Bijan Robinson at running back. Wide receiver, we're going to go ahead. We're going to play London and Garrett Wilson. A little bit of a tougher matchup for JSN. And obviously the targets aren't as concentrated in Seattle as they are with the Jets or the Falcons. And then down in the flex spot, I am going to go ahead. I will take Chase Brown. Again, if you are looking at Chase, this is a running back that's had 3 straight games with over 80% of the snaps in Cincinnati. You have the massive role as a receiver, and you do have the Bengals favored in this game, projected out really nicely in terms of their implied team total as well. Beck says, love the content, Mason. Crazy, we both drafted Jamar and Nico. Hopefully you kept Nico, my friend, but not sure what my flexes should be. Well, let's go ahead and let's dive into this. Kenneth Walker versus JSN. I think you have to go Kenneth Walker. Sadly, I pass on Kenneth Walker in the draft horribly. But, I mean, if you look at Walker, every single week he's getting there, regardless of if it's as a rusher. I mean, if you see the Seahawks winning or end up winning the game, Kenneth Walker just goes through and he gets you the 15 to 20 carries and you get the 80 rushing yards and the rushing touchdown. Whereas even if the game gets out of hand and even if the Jets are heavily leading, we should expect that Kenneth Walker gets there with the receiving usage regardless. Walker really is just absolutely matchup proof here in this Seahawks offense. So for me, I think I just have to go with him. Now, JD Skinner says, are we going to go A-Rich or Purdy? Worried about the wind and snow. I'm going to go ahead. I will take Anthony Richardson over Brock Purdy. I mean, you do have currently the Niners offense projecting out much worse than what you have with the Colts, where the Niners are down here with an implied team total about 19.5 points, whereas the Colts are up with an implied team total of about 22.5. And I will say as a quick side note, again, this is my first time ever in New York or really in the Northeast at all. And I mean this with the deepest and most sincere words I can possibly come across. If you live in New York, if you live in New Jersey, if you live anywhere over here where you are having to deal with it being 25 degrees and windy outside, I'm telling you, life can be better. I'm telling you, it doesn't need to be this way. Okay. Take a trip down to Florida. Take a trip down to Texas. Life can be good. You don't have to do this to yourself. This weather here has been horrendous. I can't deal with the cold. I'm dying over here. I can't be outside for longer than 5 minutes. I've never dealt with this. Never dealt with this. Not made for it. But anyway, let's go over to Mr. Filthy Wubs coming through with our next question. Always happy to see you, my guy. You know that. Wide receiver, really it's between Harrison and Mooney. There's no way in hell I'm starting the Niners receivers this week. I'm going to go with Harrison. You do have the Cardinals coming through and telling us that they are really going to be game planning around Harrison this week. Going down to the flex, I think we go with Brian Robinson with the Commanders being heavy favorites. They're 6-point favorites here over Tennessee. You have no Eckler. Not expecting Brian Robinson to play 85 to 90% of the snaps, of course. But I would expect him to maybe pick up a few extra targets out of the backfield. And this should be a game in which the Commanders are able to run the ball consistently. Meek coming through says, Chubb or Gus Edwards, tough matchups for both. 100%. And neither running back's going to catch the ball right. I would probably go with Nick Chubb. I don't know if we are just going through and chasing the points that we had from this past week, but we have seen at least some efficiency from Gus Edwards. Has been so inefficient all season. The man's had one target all season pretty much. I think that he ends up splitting with Vidal. So I would go with Chubb. I think the only instance I play Gus Edwards is if I'm super, super desperate. But you do have the Browns projecting out to be one of the worst offenses in the league this week. So I don't necessarily know if we are super excited to play Nick Chubb by any stretch of the imagination. Now, Uncle Dud TV says, full PBR, Jonathan Taylor or Brian Thomas Jr. For me, I go with Jonathan Taylor. Brian Thomas is definitely more exciting to play now that you have, Lawrence playing the Jags with Mac Jones. We're consistently projecting with an implied team total like 15, 16 points. They were down here like with the Raiders and the Giants with their projections. But now that you have Lawrence back, you actually have the Jags projected for about 20.5 points, up closer to like the Seahawks and Cardinals. So it should be a much better offense. And Brian Thomas should have a high target share in this offense. So I'm very excited about him. But still, Jonathan Taylor is seeing 100% of the snaps in his backfield, and the Colts are favored this week. And then if you know you have no Devonta Smith, I'd go Dallas Goedert. If it looks like Smith's going to play, I'd go Kyle Pitts. So I really have no idea at tight end, to be honest with you. I'd rank Pitts ahead of Goddard. But again, if you have no Devonta Smith, I think Goddard crushes him. Now, K. Cubius coming through with our next question. Really appreciate you. Here, down in the flex, we are looking at Breece, James Conner, Brian Thomas, Zay Floyd. You just have to go ahead. You have to play Breece. Again, you've had one game this season with fewer than 4 targets. So you have a massive floor just with what he gives you as a receiver. The spread in this game against the Seahawks, too, is only 1 point. So you very easily could see the Jets able to run the ball here in the second half. You have a tough matchup for James Conner going up against Minnesota. The receivers very much have been up and down all season. So I view Brees just as an absolute must-start running back if you have him. Obviously, it's not great that he missed practice early in the week, but he sounds like he will be fine. Now, so in cash coming through, says full BBR, we're going to be going Auden or TJ Hawkinson to start. I will go with TJ Hawkinson over Cade Auden. I mean, if I'm looking at Hawk, this is a tight end that does see a massive jump with both his snaps as well as his routes run this past week. Pretty much the highest marks that we have seen, all season for TJ Hawkinson. He looks like he's finally healthy. It's a much, much, much better situation for you to start him. Now, Damian says, Tua or Love rest of season, hard keeping Tua on the bench. Yeah, with Love, the issue is obviously this has been a spot where they've actually been able to run the ball effectively, and you haven't had to have the just air it out as we've seen with Miami, where the Dolphins really have abandoned the run at points. Obviously, Achane's getting there with what he's doing as a receiver. But I completely understand where you're coming from, because the thing is, with both quarterbacks, they are pretty much just, I would call them like streaming options at the quarterback position, where you are going based off their respective matchups. Like, I probably do need to end up moving Jordan Love down our ranks rest of season here. I would still probably prefer him over Tua. But I think outside, like, the issue is, like, if I look at my rest of season rankings at quarterback, realistically, when we get to like QB 8 with Mahomes, you can rearrange these guys in whatever order you want beyond this. I think it is just so dependent on what you are going to have. I think I should even move Stroud down a little bit further. It's going to be just so dependent on what you have matchup to matchup. So, like, regardless of how you view, say, Love versus Tua rest of season, I think you probably just roster both of them and then pivot back and forth based off the matchup that they're in. Because now their quarterback has rushing upside. You are just banking on the passing volume between both guys. And neither one's going to have the passing volume that's going to be consistent to the extent of, like, say, what you're going to get with Joe Burrow. Now, Ray Charles, happy to see us this morning, Mason. Dell Jennings or Addison? Okay, do we have anybody else to go with? I don't want to play Jennings with how bad the environment may be against Buffalo with the weather. And again, you have the Niners projected to be a bottom 5 offense in the league this week. For me, it's really Dell or Addison. Let me make sure that my rankings this week reflect that on the sites. This is week 13. I need to move Jennings even lower. Is this week 13 or is this rest of season? This is week 13. We need to move Jennings way lower than this. Right, Thomas needs to be way higher. I'd rather play Ridley over Jennings. I'd rather play Judy over Jennings. Jennings and Debo need to be extremely low in these ranks. Okay, this site's messing up. That's what's confusing me here. This is showing our rest of season rankings regardless. Okay, I need to back out and reload that. But okay, let me not save those, because that's what I was like. Chris Olave, wide receiver 40. That's rest of season. Never mind. But yeah, I'm not excited about Jennings at all with the weather in this game. If I'm looking at it again, just from an offensive projections perspective, you have the Vikings with an implied team total about 24.5 points. The Texans at 24 points in a great matchup. The Colts all the way down at the bottom. I would honestly be fine pivoting from Jennings to Addison. Like, for me, I am not excited about Jennings. I'm not excited about Debo. I play CMC. I play George Kittle. I bench Purdy, and I bench the receivers. Mr. Filthy Bubs out again. Here for the flex. Full PBR format, I'm going to see if Bo Nix can keep cooking. We're going to go with the wide receiver 2 in Denver. Decent target volume that we've had over the past 3 weeks. Yeah, Dobbins is out, but I think the Chargers running backs end up splitting the backfield. Edwards has like 1 target all season. And really, Edwards is the only other guy that you could potentially consider here. There's zero part of me that ever plays David Moore. Never. Now, B. Cosme coming through with our next question. Here down in the flex, we're looking at Hubbard, Bucky, Harrison. I think I'd probably go through and play Chuba Hubbard. I mean, I was worried that Jonathan Brooks was going to have a role as a receiver and a third down role against the Chiefs this past week, but he legitimately had nothing. Nothing at all. Now, Sean coming through with our next question says, start one of the flex between Hawkinson, Addison, or Gus Edwards. For me, I will just take the wide receiver in a full PBR format. I'm going to go with Addison. Obviously, very much boom bust. It's not like we can sit here and we can say that Addison gives you some guaranteed target share where we absolutely know that Addison is going to be the locked and loaded top 20 option as he was this past week. I will say I'm also very biased with this. I did draft a ridiculous amount of Jordan Addison in Underdog Best Ball drafts, so we stand to make a lot of money if Addison continues to play the way he has been. So I want to acknowledge my bias, but it's a good matchup, a really good projections with this Vikings offense. Typically, I always want to be going with the receiver or the tight end in the flex spot. And a full PBR format, Gus Edwards is probably going to be in a committee where Edwards will have absolutely nothing as a receiver. Now, we're going to wait just a second to get this for you, Mr. Philly Wubs. We don't have too many more questions on the site, so if you have your question on the site, you can see it on the screen with us just going through. These are the only questions we have, so we'll get to those in 1 second. I do want to answer some more of the live chat questions. Here, wait 1 second. Okay, sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. And again, I can't pull up the questions on the screen. We are on the laptop right now, so we're having to do it on the phone. So if you have any questions, please just drop them in the live chat. I'll be happy to try to read them and answer them right this second. Okay. We got Harrison or Pittman. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take Harrison. Should be a decent matchup. At the same time, again, we have a report coming out of Arizona where they are really going to prioritize getting Harrison the ball today. Ladd McConkey or Brian Robinson Jr. is actually a very interesting question, Mike. I mean, if you are looking at Robinson, really good spot in terms of the spread of this game where we can assume that they are able to run the ball in the second half. You have the expanded workload for Brian Robinson, knowing that he is going to get some additional receiving usage with no Austin Eckler. Gosh, that water's good. So it is pretty damn close there, but I probably end up going with Robinson. Alonso says Justin Herbert or Josh Allen due to the weather. I do want to reiterate, of course, that when we look at like these sportsbook projections, like sportsbooks are putting out these lines, their spreads, their over-unders, and obviously they have every little data point at their disposal. They know more about the weather. They're going to be accurate predicting this weather than I can possibly be. And they currently have the Bills with an implied team total about 25.5 points. They currently have the Bills as a higher scoring offense than the Chargers. With the weather in consideration, obviously, if you were looking at what we have as well, with Josh Allen, this is a quarterback that you get the rushing upside with that you don't have from Justin Herbert. So for me, I'd probably go ahead. I'd probably take Josh Allen. I mean, I would say I'd probably take Josh Allen. If it's my team, I would not even consider benching Josh Allen. If it was my team, I would 100% be playing him. Let me see if my matchup this week has anybody in the Buffalo game. That way I can root for it to be the grossest weather of all time. I don't think Nathan has anybody in Buffalo playing for Buffalo. Matchup. No, he doesn't have anyone. And I believe I do not either. Because, yeah, I'm personally benching Purdy for Stafford. I don't know why I'm still rostering Ricky Pearsall. There be anybody on the waiver wire more interesting than Pearsall? Probably not. Okay. Let me see if we have any more questions in the chat. I believe we should. Wade says Nathan or Avery. Honestly, I don't know. If we're looking at Nathan or Avery, trying to think of what we could compare them to. It's really like asking me a grasshopper or cricket. I don't know. They're both small bugs, irrelevant. I'll crush either of them, so it doesn't make a difference to me. Let's see. Connor says Buffalo or Pittsburgh's defense. I'm going to go Buffalo very easily. Like, the Pittsburgh defense, obviously the Steelers have one of the best defenses in the league, if not the best. But the Steelers are dogs in this game. They are going up against a phenomenal offense with the Bengals. Juan says Kittle or Taysom. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take George Kittle. Don't care what the weather is in that instance. RR Edit says, how do you feel about Dowdle as a flex? Obviously, Dowdle absolutely crushed on Thursday, and it was a good spot for Dowdle. I mean, we talked about this, but sportsbooks did have the Dallas Cowboys favored in that game, so we were looking at it saying, oh, okay, but they probably will be able to establish the run against the Giants. But a big thing is going into the future, of course, I think that Dowdle is very much how he was previously. I think Dowdle really is somebody that you're going to be looking at the matchups and going week to week based off those going into the future. So let me go ahead and pull up what we have with the games in the future for Rico Dowdle. This next week, he plays Cincy. I'd probably not be too excited to play him against the Bengals. It shouldn't be a game where the Cowboys are able to run very often. I'd imagine the Bengals are favored by about 10 points, or maybe a little under 10 points, but still. The Bengals are favored by 7-ish points in that game. Going over to the Carolina Panthers matchup, I would assume that Dowdle would be obviously a phenomenal play in Week 15. Week 16 against Tampa, Week 17 against Philly. Probably not super excited about either one of those spots, but I think Dowdle's weekly flex consideration based off matchup looks like he should have a great matchup in Week 15. Jonathan says Debo or Addison in a full PPR format. That is a very tough call, and I do think it's up to you with how worried you are about the matchup. Billy Von Peter says, is Tua a top 10 quarterback rest of season? The issue with ranking quarterbacks, and I really encourage you to go through, and obviously I make rankings and I put them out on YouTube. I update them on the site almost every single day. I've been a little bit lazy over the past few days. Like I said, obviously we've been traveling for the holidays, but it's much, much easier said than done making rankings. And I don't even want to say it that way, but it's like really easy to say, oh, Tua is a top 10 quarterback rest of season. Or, oh, Tua is not a top 10 quarterback rest of season. Like, that statement doesn't really have a lot of weight, because if you go through, and at least this is what I'd imagine you would find if you made your own rankings, is once you get past the top 5 or 6 guys, particularly at the quarterback position, quarterbacks like 7 through 15 are almost all the same. And it really is going to be up to the matchup with who you want to play. So that's why, like, if you have an elite quarterback, if you have Josh Allen, I wouldn't roster another guy, because I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, Josh Allen's in that top 5. I'm starting him every single week, regardless of the matchup. Whereas if like Tua was my quarterback 1, or like in my instance, I have 2 quarterbacks. I have Purdy and Stafford, right? I think Purdy and Stafford are almost the same rest of season. And I want to be going matchup to matchup on who I decide to play weekly. Like this week, I'm going to play Matthew Stafford. So it's like the same thing. Somebody asked us Tua versus Jordan Love earlier in the live stream. It's like, oh, rest of season. I really do think it's pretty much just up to you with what you're going to take there. And you are just going matchup to matchup with those quarterbacks. So again, it's much easier said than done making those rankings. And when you realize, especially at wide receiver, like to say, oh, this wide receiver is a top 20 wide receiver rest of season versus a top 30 wide receiver rest of season. Once you start making those rankings, you'll see like, oh, wide receiver 18, wide receiver 29, they're about the same. You know, that's why we always try to do it in terms of the tiers as well. Toothache says, is T. Higgins a strong start this week? T. Higgins is a must-start player every single week. Please get T. Higgins in your lineup. Sam says, Sutton or Jonathan Taylor. at the flex. I would go ahead. I would take Jonathan Taylor if you are looking at JT. This is the first game that we have in a while where you actually do have the Indianapolis Colts favored in this contest. And obviously, you do have just every single snap going to Jonathan Taylor. So they should be able to run the ball. Should be a much better spot for JT. But let me move over. I know we have some more questions on the site. We have to get this going for Mr. Filthy Wubs. Here, tight end, we are going to go through. We are going to take Evan Ingram over K-Dot. And now that we have Lawrence good to go and obviously nobody else healthy in Jacksonville, going down to the flex, this is where things get a little bit difficult. Dear God. Here's what I want to do. I want to say, oh, go Devonta Smith and Deebo Samuel. But the thing is, without Devonta Smith being cleared and good to go, it's like, oh, okay, well, if Smith doesn't play at 3, realistically, who can we pivot over to? Because the guy that I would want to play outside of these top 2 options would be Jaylen Warren or maybe Cade Otton, but the thing is they both play at 1. And you have Devonta Smith as that game time decision. So it is a very difficult spot here. I think plan A would be these 2 receivers. I would love to pick up, I don't know, a potential waiver wire option. I don't even know who you could go with, though, in either one of these games. Maybe go with somebody in the Monday night contest. Like, you pivot over to maybe like Elijah Moore, if need be, if Devonta Smith doesn't play. But this would be my plan A this would be my plan A with this team. Mr. Filthy Wubs with another question. Wide receiver, for the flex, you have to play Travis Etienne over these other options now that Lawrence is good to go. And then we will go with the second option here in Denver with the strong target volume and at the same time with the progression of Bo Nix. Now, Vex Dots coming through with our next question. Here it's a 2 quarterback start 11 Dynasty League. So let's go through. Chuba Hubbard sees every single snap, even with Brooks back in this offense. I think you have to play Hubbard. Najee, Chubb would be our other favorite options at running back. Let's see if we have any receivers. We have Jerry Jeudy, who we can get in. We have Devonta Smith as well. So I would actually probably plan on going with Jeudy over Najee. And here's how we're going to play this. We're going to go Jeudy over Najee. We're going to go Smith over Chubb. The good thing is, of course, with Chubb playing on Monday nights, if need be, if Smith doesn't play, you could pivot over to Nick Chubb. But full PBR format, I'm going to want to go with the receivers that have the target volume. Now, Mr. Filthy Wubs again coming out. We need a flex between Addison and Warren. I'm for sure going to go ahead. I'm going to play Jordan Addison, where Najee Harris still does have the majority of the touches here in Pittsburgh, even if Warren was more productive this past week. Mr. Filthy Wubs with another question. Here we're looking at a really Darnell Mooney, Jawan Jennings. And then again, there's no way in hell I can ever play David Moore. I mean, this is similar to how everybody was freaking pumped up about Jalen Coker a couple weeks ago. And this is a big reason why I didn't even want to make a waiver wire video this week. Because if we had people coming through hyping up David Moore, it's like realistically, why would we ever play a part-time option or just like a secondary option in one of the worst offenses in the league? Bryce Young obviously looked a lot better this past week than he has previously. But again, I mean, we have such a large sample of Bryce Young disappointing. I don't want to say Bryce Young's guaranteed to be bad through the rest of his career. I'm not going to go that far. But I'm willing to say there's no way in hell I'm excited to start any of his receivers, especially just a player like David Moore until we see something dramatically change. Now, J.K. Lou coming out with our next one. We're looking at Brian Robinson, in my mind, as somebody that you just absolutely have to play here, especially if you had the stones to play Jonnu Smith at the flex already. Congrats on that call. To be completely honest with you, I probably would have played Jerry Jeudy over Jonnu just because I'm not a fan of myself of playing tight ends in the flex position. But clearly, I would have been laughably wrong, and you absolutely crushed it. So congrats on the call. And I think you play it safe with Brian Robinson, a running back that should have the 3-down workload in an offense that leads through the majority of the game. I will go Jonathan Taylor over Brian Robinson, though. I mean, with Jonathan Taylor, also, you have a running back with the 3-down workload that should lead through the majority of the game. But the difference between Taylor and Brian Robinson is with Taylor. One, I personally view him as a more talented back. And two, you're not just getting 70% of the opportunities in your backfield. You are getting 100%. Now, obviously, if the Colts have to abandon the run and it's a really bad matchup like they had against the Detroit Lions this past week, it may not matter much. But here, it's a much better matchup against New England. Now, Raul says, overthinking, I'm sure, but are we going to go Connor or Mooney in the flex? I don't think you're overthinking it. I think it's relatively close. For me personally, I always go with the running back that's going to get you the guaranteed 15 opportunities plus. And obviously, Connor's kind of saved the day over the past 2 weeks with the usage that he's had as a receiver. He's definitely been disappointing through for really the past month, though. Or the past 2 games, then you have the bye week, so the past 3 weeks. But ultimately, you have the receiving usage. I think it's close, though, because obviously it's a tough matchup going up against Minnesota. Brosi coming through with our next question. For me, I think you have to play Garrett Wilson with Rodgers being good to go. And then I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take JSN over Marvin Harrison, despite the Cardinals coaching staff coming through and telling us that they're really going to, revolve this offense around Harrison and get him heavily involved here. But JSN, you've just had such a consistent target share for over the past 3 weeks. Now, Alex Trax says, full PPR, we're going to go Kyler or Richardson in an absolute must-win matchup. So here, I think it's very close. Obviously, we've seen a larger sample with Kyler Murray. Both quarterbacks have demonstrated that they have a very low floor, but very high ceiling based off what they can do as a rusher. Going over and looking at what we have this week with the offensive projections, sportsbooks are giving the Colts about a 22-point implied team total. You have the Cardinals about 1.5 points under that. You do have the Colts favored in their game. They maybe can run the ball a little bit more, where the Cardinals are dogs. Maybe they're going to have to throw the ball a little bit more. Both games have an over-under of about 44, 45 points. So I do think that both quarterbacks are relatively close. And in that instance, for me personally, I'm going to go with the guy that you have a little bit more of a larger sample with. I'm going to go ahead. I will take Kyler Murray. But again, I would not fault you whatsoever if you wanted to go Anthony Richardson. Like literally for my own team. And I want to ask y'all this as well. My assumption is I'm going to go with Matthew Stafford. But I actually saw about 3 hours ago, somebody in my league dropped Anthony Richardson to pick up the Niners defense. Can y'all please let me know in the live chat, who would y'all rather start this week? Would y'all rather start Matthew Stafford or would y'all rather start Anthony Richardson? Like, should I drop Stafford for Richardson? Ace says, anyone using Nick Westbrook-Ikhine in their flex, for the love of God, do not start Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. Jordan King says how to donate and ask a question. I'm sorry, I know we don't say this as much anymore, but you can always go to flockfantasy.com, hit the personal advice button, and you can ask a question that way for one of these streams. We got a Stafford, Richardson, Stafford. Stafford. Looks like most people are on Stafford. Evan says, why no quarterback, tight end, defense rankings this week? To be honest, my friend, it's the holidays. It was the girlfriend's birthday, so we went to New York. She's been here filming Happy Gilmore. I haven't seen her in effectively months. She's come to Austin for a couple weekends over the past 4 months, but this is the first time we have traveled, so we are a little bit lazy over the past 3 days. Again, I did not even watch the Chiefs game. And yeah, obviously, if we were to get out quarterback, tight end, defense rankings, it would have needed to be on a Wednesday, and there are just so many injury pieces that we didn't know the answer to. Now, Yeet Your Feet says, hey, Mason, Ladd, JSN, or Harrison in the flex in a full PPR format. For me, they are very close. I think all three are really strong plays. Obviously, Ladd is trending in the right direction. I think I probably go with Ladd McConkey as a good matchup against Atlanta in a game environment that should be really strong. Obviously, not considered about the weather here. Not concerned about the weather. Harrison, they're telling us he'll be more involved, but we've seen it with Ladd just consistently earning the majority of the targets in his offense, where Harrison, you've had McBride out earning him consistently. And JSN, you have a tougher matchup going up against the Jets. And then Hellboy Jordan, always happy to see you. Coming through with the start sit question. Running back, we have CMC and Brees as must-start options, even with lowered expectations for this Niners offense. Wide receiver, got to get A.J. Brown in. We have Otten with Kincaid out. And then down in the flex, I would go ahead. I would take Rachaad White here over. Oh, no, this is a non-PPR format. Jordan, this is a non-PPR format. I apologize. We're going to go with Gus Edwards over Rachaad White, operating under the assumption that Gus Edwards should have the goal line role in Los Angeles. And then obviously with White, he is sharing that with a multitude of other running backs, primarily Bucky Irving. If it was a full PPR format, I'd probably prefer Rachaad White because you have the additional usage as a receiver that Gus Edwards doesn't get. But in a non-PPR league, we're more so just going to be chasing those touchdowns, which I think you're a little more likely to get specifically with Gus Edwards. But let's go through and refresh this. Chris coming through with our next question. These are the only 2 questions that we have in the queue right now. So we'd answer a bunch more questions in the live chat after we answer these 2. And also, obviously, if you wanted to get a guaranteed answer to your questions, you can get them in on flockfantasy.com. Just hit the personal advice button, and we would answer it almost immediately in this stream. And going down to Chris's question, really the only conversation you could have is, I mean, you have no Olave. Hunt's already played. Ferguson, obviously, the Cowboys have already played. Ferguson was out. So really the only thing you can do is, do we start Adam Thielen? And there's no way in hell I'm starting Adam Thielen over Mike Evans or JSN. So we'll leave that the same. Quarterback, we don't have another QB outside of Richardson. But obviously we are needing to kind of chase the ceiling with the letdown from Pacheco. And I definitely ranked Pacheco way too high this week, thinking it was going to be a great matchup for the Chiefs backs. And neither Chiefs running back did anything. T. Lewis says, start Shakir or pivot off because of the snow. Thanks. Thank you. Let's see who your other options are. So if Smith plays, I would go with Devonta Smith instead of Khalil Shakir. Obviously, the issue is we just don't know about Smith because it's the 3 p.m. game, 4 p.m. game, depending on where you are. But honestly, because Shakir plays on Sunday night, I think it's a very easy spot to just say, oh, okay, plan on going with Devonta Smith and what should be the highest scoring game this week. I mean, just going through and looking at the over-unders of these games here. Yeah, you have an over-under of 51 points with the Ravens-Eagles. Should be the highest scoring game of the week. The second highest scoring game of the week should be the Rams and Saints. But I think you want as many Eagles and Ravens as you can get into your lineups this week. Obviously, it's hard to tell anybody to rely on Devonta Smith, but if it's like, oh, Smith or Shakir, then it's very easy to just say, oh, yeah, go Smith. And if Shakir doesn't play, if Smith doesn't play, you can pivot over to Shakir regardless. But let me pivot over and answer some more of the questions that we have in the live chat. What percentage is my laptop on? We got 22% on the laptop. Come on, can you make it 23 minutes, baby? Now, let's move this over. And again, I'm sorry, we are on the laptop, so I got to read the live chat on the phone to get the questions. We got Rob saying, Haley Stanfield or Taylor Swift. To be completely honest, my friend, I don't know who Haley Stanfield is. I know who Taylor Swift is for sure. I'm looking up Haley Stanfield. She's an actress, singer. Pretty girl. What does she sing? It says C also Josh Allen. Does she date Josh Allen? USA Today. Haley Steinfeld and Josh Allen hint they are engaged in romantic Instagram post. Ooh, this is what y'all come to this stream for. And Mystery says, is Downs cooked rest of season? Sadly, it looks like he most likely will be. I don't say he's going to be out rest of season, but I mean, even when he comes back, if the man's injured and you have AR as your quarterback, ripperoni, pepperoni. Joseph says Jennings over Terry. For the love of God, do not play Juwan Jennings over Terry McLaurin this week. Juwan Jennings, definitely I think you have to view as the wide receiver one here in San Francisco, but still at the same time. I mean, if we could, I would avoid starting any Niners receiver. But let's see. Jay says Harrison or JSN. I'm going to go ahead. I will take JSN over Marvin Harrison Jr. I think they're relatively close. But obviously, JSN is the hot hand at this point. Flamehawk, funny name, says, hey, need a running back in a flex. My options are Bucky, Brees, Walker, Tank, Mooney, Happy PR. You definitely play both running backs. You go with Brees and Kenneth Walker. Take the 3-down running backs that are effectively going to see 70 plus, 80 plus % of the touches in their backfield. Obviously, Bucky is the hot guy, but at the same time, you're just in much more of a committee and a split backfield with him than you are the other names. We have Caesar says Mark Andrews or Taysom Hill. I'm going to go with Taysom. I don't feel like you're just chasing the points with Taysom Hill that you had from last week. Because if you look at projections this week again, I do want to reiterate that you currently are looking at the Rams-Saints game projecting out to be the highest scoring game of the week outside of what you have with Philly, Los Angeles. While at the same time, really Taysom is the only other name in this offense outside of Kamara at this point with all the injuries that they have. Anshul says Devonta Smith or Aaron Jones. I'm going to go with Aaron Jones. Darius says Christian McCaffrey or Bucky Irving. Think about what you just asked. For the love of God, please play Christian McCaffrey over Bucky Irving. Please go with CMC. I understand, yes, the Bucs offense projects to be much, much better. But McCaffrey is going to see every single snap, every single touch. You're in way too deep if you're thinking about starting Bucky over CMC. Alejandro says Debo or Pittman. I'm going to go with Pittman. I mean, again, I'm not super excited about playing either of the Niners receivers. Well, at the same time, you have no Josh Downs. And real quick, I'm kind of spazzing about my laptop dying. My bag's right there. Let me grab my charger. Thank God, ladies and gentlemen. I thought I had lost the charger, but we found it. We are good. No worries. And I can actually turn the... I've been doing that last half of this live stream with my brightness literally all the way off on my computer. So now we can get the brightness up. I can read y'all's questions on the computer. Life will be good. Life will be good. Ooh, now I can see you, handsome gentlemen. And you fine ladies. But... okay, let's refresh this. Do we have any more questions on the site, or are we going off the phone still? We got 2 more questions in the site real quick. Cali Kid says, what's up, Mason? Little help, appreciate you. Always happy to see you, my guy. We're going to go with Baker over Russ. A really good game environment that you should have with the Bucs. Definitely more excited about Baker, of course, with us having Evans good to go. I'm going to go with Aaron Jones over Bucky Irving, whereas with Bucky, obviously, has been the more efficient back. He has a better matchup. But at least with Aaron Jones, you're looking at a running back that is going to see 80+% of the opportunities in his backfield. I'm assuming that we already played St. Brown. I would go with Kupp. Down at the tight end, I'm going to be going with, I don't know who you played between Laporta and Otten. I would have played Cade Otton. Obviously, Laporta has a phenomenal game on Thursday. And then I'm going to go ahead. I will actually play either Mike Evans or Garrett Wilson. Probably Evans over Bucky Irving, but sadly, I think you have to bench Bucky here with how strong your receivers are. R. Healy says Cade Otton or Taysom Hill in a full PPR 10-team league. Again, I think you probably go with Taysom. Not the easiest call in the world, but if you're looking at Taysom in comparison to Cade Otton here, again, you do have the Saints-Rams game projecting out to be the second highest scoring game in the NFL this week. And if you're looking at the offense for the Saints, really there are only two players that can be used. You have Taysom, Kamara, and that's pretty much it. Okay. So let's move back over to the questions that we have in the live chat on the phone. Again, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. I'd be happy to try to get to as many as we possibly can here. Austin says Garrett Wilson or Jackson Smith-Njigba. I'm going to go with Garrett Wilson over JSN. If you are looking at Garrett Wilson, this is a wide receiver, again, that's in just a super concentrated offense where there'll only be 3 players that touch the ball. Spread in this game is only 1 point as well, so it should be a relatively close situation in terms of the total points scored in Seattle versus the Jets. We got a couple of people asking Garrett Wilson or Aaron Jones. Honestly, very fair call on either end. If you're looking at Garrett Wilson in a full PPR format, should have a few more receptions, giving you that buffer. I think Aaron Jones, you're more likely to get the touchdown. So I'd say Aaron Jones for sure in a non-PPR league. Full PPR league, if you wanted to go with Garrett Wilson, I'm not going to fault you, but I think both are great plays this week. Anonymous says, it's time to play the game. I don't know the dude's name. He's the guy that sings on Instagram Reels. It's time to play the game. Hopefully y'all get it. If y'all don't, that's a little weird, but Josh says, T. Higgins or Chuba Hubbard in a full PPR format. Chuba Hubbard sees every single touch in his backfield this past week. What's actually funny is I was concerned with Jonathan Brooks coming in, and I thought Brooks was going to take the third down role. However, I mean, Brooks sees nothing. Literally, the first game that you get with Jonathan Brooks, you end up giving Chuba Hubbard the most snaps that he has seen all season from a percentage perspective. So I don't know. Let me see what we have with, but I kind of view T. Higgins as just an absolute must-start option, especially in a full PPR format. So let me pull up what the Underdog projections are. Again, we talked about Higgins being higher, lower, 79 receiving yards on Underdog. Chuba Hubbard, they have it higher, lower, 86.5 total yards, 13.5. I think you probably end up playing Chuba Hubbard. But I really don't want to tell anybody to bench Higgins. JP asked Stafford or Purdy. I'm going with Stafford over Purdy with my own team. Science of the Right says, should we start London or Connor at the flex? I'm going to go with Drake London over James Conner. Connor is a tough matchup here. Now, Japith coming through says JSN or George Pickens. I'm going to take, dear God, it is very close. I'd probably go Pickens with JSN having a pretty tough matchup. Yeah, I think you go Pickens. Jackson says Brian Robinson or Calvin Ridley need some help. I will go with Brian Robinson, a really good spot if you were looking at just the game environment with it being a pretty large spread between the two offenses and us assuming that we are going to get a considerable amount of pass attempts here for the Commanders. I'm moving this over. Justin says Chase Brown or Breece Hall. Dear God, both running backs should obviously see very large workloads. You have a larger sample with Breece, but it is tough to say for sure what end you are wanting to go. You have the Cincinnati Bengals favored in this game, but on paper, a tougher matchup going up against Pittsburgh, of course. Can I look at what the underdog picks are for Chase Brown? Because honestly, I haven't had to really think about this much because we've been calling both Chase Brown and Breece Hall just must-start options every single time we've had a question about either of them. Haven't really thought we had to think about it. Chase Brown's at higher lower 99.5 total yards. Whereas if you're looking at Breece is higher lower 85.5 total. So I guess you go Chase Brown. I mean, you do have the Bengals projected out to be a much better offense this week if you are looking at sportsbooks. Now, of course, with that in mind, I mean, you're also in a situation in which you do have a larger sample with Breece Hall in comparison to what you do with Chase Brown. Evan says Taysom or Addison in the flex. For me, my brain's broken, and I just absolutely never want to play a tight end in the flex spot, so I'd rather go Addison. Okay. Sal says, what are we thinking of Tua rest of season? I think that Tua is a streaming option at quarterback that you play based off matchups. I think Tua is in the same realm as what you have with guys like Matthew Stafford, Brock Purdy, CJ Stroud, where they're quarterbacks that you don't just roster one and play him every single week regardless of the matchup. Tua is not Josh Allen. He's not Lamar Jackson. He's not Joe Burrow. He's not Jalen Hurts. So I think Tua is just in the mix of like, oh, okay, you roster two quarterbacks and you go back and forth between them based off whatever their matchups are that week. Nutty Squirrel says, need a wide receiver too between Addison and Bateman. I'm definitely going to go with Addison over Bateman. No world in which I decide to play Bateman. Christian says, hey, Mason, do we start Rashad White or Gus Edwards in a PPR league? I actually answered this question in a non-PPR format about 30 minutes ago. Non-PPR format, I want to go ahead and I want to take Gus Edwards. Full PPR league, give me Rashad White. Non-PPR format, give me Edwards. Full PPR league, give me White. Where my thing with Edwards is I just think that you have absolutely nothing as a receiver. Nothing at all. And let me just double check. I think I kind of get lucky here because I don't know if I will say, if y'all been tracking my Underdog best ball teams, which I know there's that one site that you can track Best Ball Mania in the amount of teams that we're advancing. Last I checked, we were advancing like 40 teams in Best Ball Mania. I am absolutely crushing it and could not be more excited. But I believe we drafted more. Yes, we drafted more Gus Edwards than J.K. Dobbins. I have 10% Edwards and 6% Dobbins. So honestly, I kind of get lucky with this Dobbins injury propping up Gus Edwards for me. Honestly, get really lucky. And what I really need is I need some more Quentin Johnston performances. Afam says Gus Edwards or Deebo Samuel. Not really excited to play Deebo. Obviously, I don't want to play either of the receivers here in San Francisco. Full BBR format, if I had to pick one or the other, I would go with Deebo, though. And also, please, if you have not done so already, can you hit that like button, ladies and gentlemen? Subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. I'm sorry that we only got out like 3 or 4 videos this week. I apologize, but honestly, it is what it is. It is what it is. Eric says Hawkinson or Cade Otton. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take TJ Hawkinson. Y'all know those PFF charts that we show in the videos, especially on Sunday nights. And if you go through and if you look at TJ Hawkinson's route involvement, it's like flat, 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 flat. I mean, it's more like flat for the first 3 weeks of his return. Then this past week, took a massive jump up. Like, you actually do have Hawkinson involved a lot more in this offense now than he was previously. Okay. The law says Lad Connor or Brian Robinson in a full PPR format. So I'm playing James Conner myself. I don't have these other guys, though. Actually, I did have Lad for a minute, but we traded him away for DK. Not looking good. For me, I probably go ahead. I take Brian Robinson, though. Just the thing is with Robinson versus James Conner, I think you have a much better game environment for Brian Robinson. Okay. Warrior Zone says, do we start Harrison or Devontae Adams? I'm more excited with Adams than we were earlier this week based off how the projections have changed for this Jets offense. It looked like sportsbooks were kind of pricing in the possibility that Rodgers wasn't going to play this week early on. And now, obviously, that we know Rodgers is good to go. I don't know. I think it is up to you because you have the positive with things are turning in the right direction with the projections that you have with the Jets. We're now the spread on this game is only 1 point. You actually have the Jets projecting out to be an average offense now, super concentrated. You have the Cardinals coaching staff coming through and saying, oh, okay, well, you know what? We're actually going to get Harrison more involved. So I do think it's up to you. Nathan says Debo or Gus. I think we already answered this. Full PPR format. Give me Debo. Not excited about it. Sean says Sutton or Higgins. They're ranked almost back-to-back for us in our rankings this week. I'd probably go. I'm really excited about both receivers. You have Higgins higher or lower 70.5 receiving yards this week. Can we see what we have with Sutton? And why did my phone just turn the Wi-Fi on? Sorry, y'all's chats are lagging a bit. And what we're going to do for tonight's stream, tonight's video, y'all know typically I release the video every Sunday night after the games. But what I usually do is like right after the main slate of games, like the 3 p.m. slate, I'm going to go with Higgins over Sutton. I record the video, and then during the Sunday night game, I have it on one monitor. On the other monitor, I edit the video recapping everything. But I'm going to be getting on a flight at about 6 today. I'm going to get into Austin right before the Sunday night game ends. So I'm not going to be able to record that and edit for y'all, but I definitely want to get something out and talk about the games after they end. So I'm just going to live stream everything that happened. So I'll be live after the games tonight rather than making that video. Okay. Bulls Pippin says Goddard over Njoku, half PPR. I'd go with David Njoku unless Devonta Smith gets ruled out. I guess you have that call. So if Smith plays, go Njoku. If Smith misses, go with Goddard. Pitts or Amari? Give me Amari over Pitts, despite the weather, but you also have no Kincaid and potentially no Keon in Buffalo. Let me just triple check real quick and refresh to see if we have any questions on the site. Okay, no, we don't. Okay, good. I'm making sure we weren't missing anything. Joe says, Longhorns alum. We got another Texas X here. Breece Hall or Garrett Wilson at PBR format. Go ahead. Just take Breece Hall, my guy. Just take the running back with the 3-down workload. Zero hesitation. You also have, again, my favorite stat with Breece is you have one game with fewer than 4 targets this season. So just in terms of finding running backs with a high floor, there are very few running backs that have a higher floor than Breece Hall at this point. Jake says, Juwan Jennings or Adam Thielen. There's nothing that could ever get me to start Adam Thielen this week. Go ahead and play Juwan Jennings, even if typically we are wanting to avoid the receivers in San Francisco. Now, Ophidion says, sit one, Kamara, Bucky, Mixon, or CMC. I'd sit Bucky there very easily. You listed off 3 bell cow running backs with McCaffrey, Mixon, Kamara, and then an exciting committee RB with Bucky Irving. You always play the bell cows over the exciting committee running back. So please bench Bucky. The sauce says game starting right now. Well, much love, ladies and gentlemen. I'm wishing you all the best of luck. What I need with my own team this week, just to let everybody know, I'll show y'all one more time, even though I know only about 5% of y'all care. If y'all haven't seen, which I'm sure the majority of y'all have, if y'all search the Flock League on YouTube, y'all can see an entire YouTube channel dedicated for this league. I have a ton of fun with it. It's by far and away my favorite YouTube channel, period, on YouTube. And I'm a freaking YouTube addict. I watch it 24/7. But anyway, big thing that I need with my matchup is I am playing Stafford. My opponent has Puka Kyron and the Rams defense. So I'm really going to be watching the Rams game. And I want a Stafford rushing touchdown. I want a big Cup game. I want Cup 2 touchdowns, Stafford a rushing touchdown. And then hopefully the Saints are able to put points up on the board as well. And the Rams disappoint here too. But I guess we're playing for, I guess it's bad news for us playing the Houston defense with Lawrence being good to go. But anyway, I appreciate you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, of course, for sticking with me this Sunday morning. We'll be back in the regular studio tonight, so the stream should be a little bit better. And really hope I get to see you then. But if not, really appreciate you and really hope that you are able to win this week.